Hello, I'm Nicola Foley, and this is the Let's Talk About podcast. Let's Talk About was created to highlight important issues and bring back the art of conversation, because everybody has a story to tell, right? Menopause affects half the world's population, but despite more people talking about it than ever before, it remains shrouded in mystery. It often takes women experiencing debilitating symptoms such as hot flushes, night sweats, and memory loss by surprise. HRT, or hormone replacement treatment, and antidepressants are often the only help GPs offer. But what happens if HRT isn't an option for you? CBT, or cognitive behavioural therapy, is already on my radar as I've had it for PTSD, but until a few weeks ago I had never heard of it being used to treat menopause symptoms, despite the fact it's now in the NICE guidelines as an effective alternative for HRT. As my mum had hormone-related breast cancer, I'm not keen on taking HRT, so I wanted to find out more about CBT and its effectiveness in treating menopause symptoms. Today I speak with Susan, who explains why HRT didn't work for her and what other treatments she's tried. Then I spoke with Doctor Laura Jarvis, a specialty doctor in sexual and reproductive health. She's also a menopause specialist and is trained in psychosexual health. We spoke about what HRT does and why it's so widely prescribed, but also what happens when you can't take it. Let's talk about HRT, CBT, and the menopause.
By 40, our middle finger is at half-mast. By 50, it's full on up. By 60, both of those fingers are hoisted and not a single care is given anymore. I mean, we care about our family, our friends, and our passions. We care about the environment. We care about equality and living in peace. But we don't care about fitting in. And we don't care about what people think of us. Not anymore. Too many years were wasted on that. We certainly don't care to stay quiet or bite our tongues. We haven't wasted all these life lessons to play dumb when the situation calls for our wisdom. Neither do we care if our waistline is the acceptable size or if our thighs are toned and unblemished. We have wrinkles. We have stretch marks, we have war wounds, warts and all, and we're rocking each and every one of them in all their glory. You see, there comes a time in every woman's life where you realise that this is it. This is the time to be alive, to live without restriction or oppression, to break free of the chains society binds us with and tear loose. This is our time to be completely and totally who we were supposed to be all along. The sooner you get there, the better. Life waits for no woman.
Hi Susan, thanks for doing this today. Thanks for speaking to me.
Hi, it's a pleasure. I'm more than happy to.
Could you tell me a little bit about your experience with HRT?
HRT didn't work for me because I get really bad migraines and they're hormonal migraines, and I've been going to try and get something sorted about this for years. They used to tell me when I was on the combined pill to take it indefinitely, and then my levels never dropped, and that worked okay for me, but eventually it became bad practice to do that. After I had kids, they said, oh no, we've realised that that's actually increases your risk of a stroke, especially if you get migraines. So I'm thinking, all right, you've only just realised that now, and I've been doing this for years. So I then went on the mini pill, and progesterone, which is in the mini pill, is not great for such things either. It can play havoc. It's not so much the estrogen, it's the progesterone. So it didn't stop the migraines happening.
So this is when you tried HRT?
Tried it twice. The first time it was tablets that I took, but I still got the headaches. And when I get a migraine, it floors me for 4 days. It will last exactly 4 days long, and I'm out the game, basically. I can barely function, feel sick. I just feel awful. So it didn't do anything to prevent those. So I thought, well, what's the point of taking it then? I got another one that was just a cream to try in a certain place. And that made the headaches worse. So I thought, well, I'm not taking that one either. And then the last time, in fact, it's 2 times I've been prescribed it. The last one, and I did giggle at this because the doctor gave me, it was a cream that you rubbed in your thigh. That was the estrogen cream. And then you had to do that every day. I was prescribed progesterone as well to take for 12 days or something in tablet form. And that's to stop the lining of your womb building up too much or something. But it just almost seemed to anaesthetise me. I felt really dopey on it and just felt, well, I can't even remember if I still got headaches. I can't actually remember because I felt so anaesthetised. I thought, well, I'm not feeling anything here. I can't function. I can't do anything. So it really didn't work for me. And I just think my body reacts badly to hormones being added into the mix. And even when I think, because at the time you don't think about it, you just do it. And when I was on the combined pill, it probably didn't do me any good either. But you just took it because it was the lesser of many evils of getting headaches or getting pregnant, which I didn't want at the time. So you just got on with it. But for some women, extra hormones really, we can see the havoc that hormones cause. So for some, adding more into that mix just makes it worse. It's not to say it doesn't work for everybody, but everybody's as unique as the fingerprint. So there just has to be a more holistic approach to feel listened to for a start, rather than just a 10-minute, all right, try HRT, that'll be fine.
Or antidepressants. A lot of women get offered those first.
Yes, exactly. And thinking, well, that's not necessarily my friend. That happened to my friend. She was given antidepressants. And when you look back now, actually, she finished with the periods about 4 years ago. So she must have been in the throes of perimenopause and all that entails. And she was prescribed antidepressants. And probably HRT would have maybe worked for her, but she wasn't offered it. I've had more help from going on to forums where other people talk about their symptoms and what works for them, discussed with other people for whom HRT wasn't this magic wonder drug, and they said what sort of things that they did. And there was one woman, she took a veritable concoction of vitamins and certain things that really helped. And I wrote it all down and I started doing the same, and it did help enormously. So I take a concoction of vitamins, vitamin B6, vitamin B complex, vitamin D, magnesium, and evening primrose and starflower oil, sorbatal. And I'd actually been weaning myself off it because my hormones were much more calm and I wasn't needing them as much. And I felt, yeah, I want to finally feel like myself. I just felt a bit more energised. I felt less anxious and stressed. Anxiety is something I'd never suffered from before. But from a holiday at one point when I was sitting with my head buried in my hands because I was terrified we were going to fall off the cliff, and thinking, this is not me, I'm not that sort of person. That's when I just kind of knew that some switch had been flipped. But then I was on setting a period just last week and suddenly familiar feelings returning, thinking, well, I need to up the levels.
So, all the alternative treatments you looked at on those websites and that, was that, did you find CBT on there?
It didn't actually pop up in any research that I conducted, which is quite astonishing if it's been mooted as a tool that could possibly help, because I think HRT is always the go-to one, and it does work for so many people, which is great. And if it works for some people, absolutely go there. But there doesn't seem to be that many alternatives offered. And when I went to the GP with my various ailments, HRT was really the only thing that was offered, which didn't work for me, as I've explained. But there's nothing else ever suggested which might be helpful. I had to go and do all that research myself, and yeah, it came up with various try black cohosh, try St. John's wort, and all that sort of stuff. CBT wasn't anything that popped up on the list of potential this might work for you. Which is a pretty broad reflection if it kind of shows what people are up against, if not even at that level. And I think I'm quite good at research as a form of research. That was that popping up in the search engines as an option. And you really want as much in your toolbox as possible to try. Although I'd be quite curious, I can understand, I know how it works, and I can see how it would work if you're feeling stressed or anxious for those parts. But for For the physical parts, if I'm a logic person, I like to know how things work. Sometimes you don't need to know how they work, they just work. That's good. So it might mean that I'm not so open to CBT, although I think I do probably do elements of it subconsciously. But I'd be curious as to know how CBT could take the pain of a migraine away, because that's kind of the very physical side, that plus extreme exhaustion at some points. But I can see how CBT would work for certainly other parts of it. But no, it didn't appear in any research as a magic cure, and it wasn't mooted at the GP when I went there. But I mean, it's difficult for GPs. They've got 10 minutes to try, and people want a quick fix, don't they? And sometimes a quick fix. Yeah, I mean, the HRT is mooted as the wonder drug, so if that works for people, great. You can see why doctors want to try that first. But if you then go back and say, look, it's not really working for me, and in the first case, it didn't stop the migraines. The third case, it made me feel anaesthetised. I still wasn't offered any alternatives. It was, oh, well, that's it. So because of that, it makes me, I'm not really a depressive person, but it made me feel quite demoralised. So then I go and conduct my own research and speak to as many people as I can to find out what worked for them. And then you have to pinch little bits here and there, thinking, right, I'll give that a go. And what works for me, again, might not work for the next person, because everybody's so unique. You know, some people don't have any effects of the menopause, other folk do. Some folk are allergic to eggs, some folk aren't. That's how unique we all are. So given the incredible concoction of hormones that are in our bodies and the upheaval that happens, I mean, we see what it happens at the beginning when we all hit puberty. And for women, it's almost the reverse of that. You can imagine if it only affected a minuscule part of the population, that it's not such an issue. It affects half the world population, and there's still so little out there for us. I just find it incredible. I think that's probably the biggest frustration. It makes you feel unvalidated as a human, really. We're just expected to get on with it. Don't moan about it. You don't like to keep going back and pestering either, because you think, oh, because your gran and your granny's gran before, that's what they had to do, was just get on with it. So there's elements of that as well. But hopefully in a few generations, people will be much more vocal, and that in itself will generate much more research, because we all live longer, but you want to live a longer, healthy, pain-free life rather than live another 30 years feeling a bit crappy, which is not really much fun.
No. Well, thanks very much for speaking to me today.
You're very welcome. It's my pleasure.
Hey Laura, thank you for doing this. It's very good of you to give your time.
Pleasure.
I wanted to talk today about CBT mainly. There are some people, and especially I suppose cancer patients, that can't have HRT. What are your thoughts on CBT? And if you want to give us a background of menopause and why women are normally offered HRT first.
So when women go through the menopause, really, what they're suffering from is a withdrawal of estrogen hormone in their bodies, essentially. So the treatment that works the very best is to give them some estrogen replacement. But there are a myriad of reasons why women, either they can't use estrogen replacement, for example, they've got breast cancer, or perhaps they choose not to, and that's absolutely fine if people want to explore alternatives. You know. That's
the other thing I don't understand. Some people saying that they kind of get back to having a great memory, feel energized again after they've gone through it. So surely if you're going to lose estrogen, and that you would think that would affect you for the rest of your life, how do you get back to being just okay again?
It's weird, isn't it? I know. I mean, your body still does produce a little bit of estrogen, but just not from your ovaries anymore.
Right.
You just wonder, don't you, whether some people can tolerate just being on a lower level of it.
Right.
I mean, we know that it's not a correlation. So if we measure people's estrogen levels in their blood, it's not a direct correlation. So some people will feel terrible at that level. Other people will feel fine. So I agree. That's really puzzling, isn't it? How some people just seem to adapt, and it doesn't seem to bother them. Other people need HRT for the rest of their lives. They just don't. They cannot live without it. It's peculiar. I know. Don't know. I don't think we know the answer to that one. I can give one woman like an HRT, and she comes back and says, "I feel wonderful. It's great. I'm sleeping well. All the aches and pains have gone. My flushes are gone." I can give the same one to somebody else, and she feels terrible. She's getting breast tenderness. She's it's not helping her flushes to you know. So it's not an exact science. So you just have to. You're dealing with the humans, so it's tweaking it and.
Yeah. Well, our bodies are like chemical, aren't they? And they're not all going to respond to the same things the same way. That's the problem. And until you try it, you just don't know, do you? You know, this is the problem with this. It's so vast, and there's a social aspect of it. And then obviously we've got a cultural thing where in this country we're quite negative towards aging, and it can be a bit of a joke, the menopause.
I think there is something wrong with our society. Women have to look young and beautiful. And I'm really delighted to start seeing now in magazines and adverts, sometimes them using slightly older women with grey hair and
Dove. They're quite good.
Yeah. So I think there is changes afoot.
Yeah. How has CBT influenced the way you do your job?
So I'm a specialty doctor in sexual and reproductive health, and I'm a menopause specialist. I'm also trained in psychosexual medicine as well. So we see patients for sexual problems and also for menopause issues as well at the Tayside Menopause Clinic. A number of years ago, 3-4 years ago, I was lucky enough to go on a CBT for menopause course run by the British Menopause Society. And I found that extremely useful, both for my patients, but also for myself, and also, you know, in terms of talking to friends and even family about how our thoughts really are so influential about how we feel and then how we behave.
Which is basically what CBT is.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So you went on the course. So do they offer that course to you as part of your job, or do they offer it to every GP, or is it quite specific to?
Yeah. So that was offered to me and paid for by NHS Tayside, which was fantastic. There are a number of GPs have undertaken some CBT training. It's something you can do a weekend course in it. To be a sort of a CBT practitioner, you really need to be a psychologist and have years and years of training. So I would never profess to be in that league, but certainly you can have a few sort of rudimentary tools that you can use to help patients.
Right. So what would be better, do you think would it be better if GPs, I think there's no doubt it would be better if they had a better base understanding of it, maybe, so that they could refer to somebody else. But would it be better if this was concentrated in clinics of specialists, or would it be better if GPs had sort of more training, and what would cover more women, I guess? Because I think at the moment they're not like quite high waiting lists for women that are having extreme problems and stuff.
So our clinic in Tayside has quite strict referral criteria, because we can't see every woman in Tayside with a menopause. We have to see the people where the GPs have already tried some initial therapies, or we see the much more complex cases, because just simply there's only 3 of us. We can't see 200,000 women a year. So
form a queue.
Yeah, exactly. What I think the best thing we can do is upskill the GPs.
Yeah.
And also upskill the average female population, so that people understand a bit more, and then our work will be easier. You know, and it's like I go into and do these menopause work seminars. Like, just anybody's invited to come, like at the hospital, and we get maybe 30 or 40 women turning up. And you think, if I spend an hour doing that, it's brilliant, because that information is then disseminated to all those people in that room. And then they'll probably then disseminate it to another few friends as well. So it's an hour very well spent of my time, rather than me having to tell that person face to face 200,000 times. You know, that's really not efficient use of our time.
As there is evidence with CBT that it has worked in some cancer patients, that's kind of encouraging, isn't it?
Absolutely. There is good evidence that the CBT helps menopause symptoms. And CBT's been around for a long time. It's been around since the 60s, and we know it works for a lot of other conditions as well, including chronic pain and anxiety, depression, mental health problems. So most medical practitioners will be very familiar with CBT and referring people to CBT, or referring them for online CBT, people can do themselves. But maybe they're not quite so familiar with it being used in the menopause setting.
Yeah, do you think that's down to something you've actually said to me before about GPs not getting a massive amount of training? It's not compulsory, is it, any kind of training for GPs for menopause?
Yeah, they'll get very little actually. And remember, they are generalists, so they get a little thin smattering of lots of things.
Yeah.
But what we're really trying to encourage is maybe one GP in a practice to take a particular interest in menopause, maybe just delve a little bit deeper, so they can be the go-to clinician should a patient need a bit more advice.
Yeah, I think I read a statistic in 2023. There's going to be something like 1.2 billion women going through the menopause worldwide. You'd think with those kind of numbers that it, because there's not a lot of research done either, is there? Even with HRT.
That's right. I know. I think it's been. I think generally in women's health in general, I think there is an inequality issue there about women's issues are neglected globally, aren't they? We know that.
Yeah. Yeah. In some cultures, they deal with it better, and the women are kind of revered when they get older.
That's right. There's also wisdom that comes with old age, and unfortunately, in this country, it's seen as a negative thing, aging.
Yeah.
And I heard a person say to me recently, that women over 50 are like invisible. I don't know if that's the case actually, but maybe that's how she felt. She felt invisible.
I think I can relate a little bit. I think there is, there's definitely a certain age that you pass, and your opinion does seem a little bit less relevant, and you do feel a little bit. I can totally relate to that.
I was thinking some people find that invisibility liberating, though. Maybe in some way there's a liberation there. You can be you, and you can say what you like, and you don't have to conform anymore. Maybe so you could look at it, like CBT. We're always trying to turn our thoughts around, so we can think in a more positive way, more constructive way.
I think that's the problem, isn't it? If it's a cultural thing, and that's your psyche is to see it all as negative.
And it's so interesting when you talk to people about CBT and you show them how it works, and you draw the little diagram and show them where they're sitting, where their thoughts are. Some people, it's like a light bulb going on, and you can see they just want to run with this. It's been a revelation. They just want to. Other people look at you as if to say, "No, but I want you to fix me."
Yeah.
And I think it depends on the personality of the people. If they are not very proactive, they just don't know. You're like, no, but you're an expert in you, not me. You know more about you than me. Let me give you the tools to go away and fix yourself, as it were.
Yeah. I think if any counselling fails, that's why it fails, because they're there in the capacity of, like, if you've got sort of a really bad illness and people give you medication and it cures that illness, people seem to think about mental health like that as well, and it's not like that at all. It's your head, and sometimes you do need medication, sometimes it's really extreme, and there's always a place for medication, but I think a lot of the time people could look back at themselves and go, hang on, what am I thinking, what am I doing?
CBT's come under a little bit of criticism because it seems to be like the treatment for everything now. Oh, CBT. Like you go into the NICE guidelines for everything. Oh, CBT. And so it's not the treatment for everything at all.
Yeah.
But I think you're absolutely right, and that it is worth just looking at what thoughts you have going around in your mind and what could be perpetuating some of this negative thoughts around your health and well-being. And definitely, yeah.
That there's always a place for things like HRT, and people do suffer extreme symptoms, and, it works for them. And I don't want to discount anything. I don't want to make people think they can't use anything, because I think that's the most predominant question I've been asked is there any alternatives? Are there any alternatives?
Absolutely. So some women can't use HRT at all, and it's completely forbidden for them. Some have tried it and it's no good. And some don't want to use it. Fair enough. It's their choice.
Yeah.
So for those women, definitely. But even for the women who are on HRT, it's definitely worth also looking at your thoughts and your emotions, and whether they could be in some way making things worse for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And in fact, what they've shown in various research is that, first of all, if you buy a CBT book for menopause and actually do it yourself, research has shown that was just as effective as doing it with a face-to-face practitioner.
Yeah.
So that's really interesting. And the other thing that can work is group CBT. So in terms of like reducing the costs, those are two very, very effective ways of reducing the cost of it for women.
How would that work though? Because I mean, at the moment, would a GP even be able to refer somebody to a group sort of menopause related CBT session?
No, I mean, we in Tayside, myself and my colleagues are trained in this CBT for menopause way, and we would very much like to set up a group, and it's a sort of like a 6-week course that you sort of take people through it. But once again, it comes down to funding.
Yeah.
And although it is cost effective, it's quite difficult to find money to pay for the clinicians to run that.
Okay.
So actually, offering people the book and to buy the book is cheaper.
Yeah.
And in fact, I think there was a company that just routinely gave their menopausal women the CBT book. So I said, look, this may help you. This may help you, support you through this phase, which actually is quite a good idea, isn't it?
It's quite a good idea for employers to look at as well, surely, because like if they're, having a lot of women off because they're ill constantly with the menopause and stuff, surely, because I think a lot of them do first aid training now, don't they? In mental health first aid training. Yeah. So it would kind of maybe be worth looking into employers incorporating that into something as well. That might be.
Yeah, absolutely.
But policies are changing, aren't they? So like, what do policies say at the moment? Is that literally sort of from a legal angle for women to protect their rights? Or I don't actually know what policies do at the moment for employees in menopause. I know there are some coming in.
I think probably now it is considered to be something that is significantly impair people's health and ability to work. So there's a little bit more sympathetic when it comes to things like, medical leave, sort of sick leave and sick pay. Whereas before, maybe it wouldn't have been particularly sympathetic towards women taking time off at this because of menopause symptoms. It might have been sort of scoffed at, or
right.
At least now it's more recognised as an entity that can be significantly difficult.
Yeah. Okay. So what do you do with your patients that come in now if they've sort of tried hormonal treatments and they don't work? Is that something you would consider recommending to them? And if you do, then where would they go from there? Sort of.
Yeah, that definitely. Yeah, I would definitely recommend it. And the British Menopause Society produced a really nice patient information leaflet, which I would first of all I would a little bit talk to them myself about what CBT is, and maybe just try and use some examples about perhaps. During our consultation, they may have said some things to me like, I just feel that when I have a flush, everybody's staring at me. I feel so embarrassed. It's really affecting my ability to work. So if I hear these things, I would maybe sort of just do a little bit myself and just say, that's interesting, isn't it? Can we look at that a different way? How does that make you feel? So I do a little bit of that with my patients. And then I would sort of signpost them towards the leaflets, which is very good, and the self-help book, really.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, that's great. I think it would be great if we could do sort of more research into it, because obviously breast cancer patients, I suppose they're in quite sort of a desperate situation in a sense that they're limited in options, and I suppose that kind of forces you then to look for other treatments, doesn't it, and for what might work.
Right.
And I don't think treating anybody from past experience with myself in a crisis situation ever works as effectively as it does when you're maybe not. So it may be a good thing, I thought, and I don't know if this is right or wrong, but for me, CBT worked when I was in a much better place myself. And I think I was more able to process it and to see the benefits from it. So I think it might be better doing that if you're calmer. So if you could maybe learn about it before you're anywhere near the menopause, would be a good idea. And then it might work better.
Well, I mean, I personally think that a little bit of CBT, a little bit of understanding about CBT is almost like a life skill, isn't it? And I just wonder why we're not really teaching it in schools.
Yeah.
Because if sometimes, I've spoken to my kids about it, and we've looked sometimes when they've got themselves anxious about something or irrational about something, and we've looked at their thoughts and how that's fueling their emotions and then their behaviour. And for them, it's a bit of a light bulb moment when they suddenly realise how interconnected it all is. And I think, gosh, this wouldn't it be great if people understood how their minds and their thoughts worked at school? Why aren't we teaching kids this?
I mean, yeah, because you can understand it in such a busy world. People, because obviously if you're ill and you go and get drugs, that's quite a quick fix. Whereas if you do CBT, it is a little bit, you've got to practice it, you've got to think about it, you've got to actually actively do it. So, and it can take time, and if I can imagine if you're a woman and you're in the middle of all these desperate, horrible symptoms you're going through, you're not necessarily going to want to do that. So I can kind of understand that. But at the same time, investing in it and putting that effort into it, yeah, the long-term benefits. And like you said earlier, you can treat PTSD with this and all sorts of, different sort of really quite severely life-impacting illnesses and conditions. So, yeah, it would make sense, wouldn't it, to have it in schools and...
But absolutely, you're absolutely right. You need to, it's like a training, isn't it? You have to train your brain the same way that you need to train to run a marathon or to... You have to, and it takes a lot of practice to start thinking in a different way. The pathways have been formed over many, many years. You've gone along that route, and it's kind of how do you then redirect your thoughts to take a slightly different route? It takes, like you say, a lot of practice and repetition.
So how do you think it affects like physical symptoms? Say if you're having migraines or if you're having really bad night sweats, because as you said, it's not going to actually take the symptoms away. So how would it kind of work in that sense, do you think?
Yeah, so let's take the example of that night sweats. So you're waking up at night, you're in a horrible wet, drenched with sweat, roasting hot. Now, how do you think about that? What are the thoughts that then go through your mind? Oh, for goodness sake, roasting hot again. This is such a pain. I'm never going to get enough sleep. I've got a really important meeting tomorrow. And if your head fills with these thoughts, it may be that will fuel some quite negative emotions like anxiety, pressure, tension, stress. And of course, once you've started to kick into those emotions, they themselves will kick into the sort of flight and fight mechanism, which then you start releasing adrenaline. So then you do get hot and flushed and your heart rate goes up. And so you can see how you get yourself into this terrible vicious cycle. If instead you can reframe those thoughts and say something like, okay, I'm having a flush. Let's just let this pass. It'll go in a few minutes. I'll just maybe nip to the loo, change my top. I'll just take a few rescue breaths, calm down, do some deep breathing. It may be that you'll be able to then not trigger that secondary response, which is really so additive and so kind of destructive on top of
exacerbates the symptoms, doesn't it? That also feeds back into our massively busy lifestyles though as well, doesn't it? And everybody needing a result now, because especially if you're in a really high powered job, we should look at it more as one size does not fit all with this. We should look at it more like if you've got mild to sort of moderate symptoms, you'd probably be better off doing CBT or trying to work on yourself. Whereas if it's severe, because there's always going to be those cases where somebody, because I mean, I've had hormonal changes and I've had, breakdowns and things, and they are severe. And you don't really want to be messing about with like trying to sit there kind of doing CBT when you need something.
Yeah, absolutely. But there's definitely a place for both. And the two are not mutually exclusive. You can use both,
It's like sometimes though, some therapies don't work because people do need antidepressants to get in a better place to, so I think that was the thing with drugs with the ADHD podcast that I did as well, was that, drugs are a great first, starting point because they can get people calm and they can actually think to then be able to do things, lifelong things, because I suppose drugs, for a long, long time are not ever a good thing, are they really, unless you've got a chronic illness that you don't really have a choice.
Absolutely, and most psychiatrists or GPs would treat like a severe mental health problem like that. They would get the medication on board ASAP, because if somebody's suicidal, for example, you're not going to be fiddling about with CBT.
No.
But then, like you say, to prevent relapses and going forward, for them to work on their own mental health strategies, CBT then afterwards is a great thing.
I guess it would be like sort of being an alcoholic as well. If you stop drinking all of a sudden and you've drank for years and years and years, you're going to have severe side effects and stuff. And I suppose what stops you going back to just drinking when something gets tough again? If that was your go-to, self-medication sort of technique, what stops it? And I think that's kind of what CBT is, isn't it? It's that whole changing of your mindset. You can't change who you are. I can't change my anxiety. I can't change the fact that I'm autistic, but I can change how I respond to it, and that's what CBT is.
Totally. Yeah, absolutely. So the same with menopause. You may be having hot flushes, you are aging, there is things going on, you've got this, but you can change the way that you respond to that. And some of that response is very negative and actually makes things a whole lot worse again, Totally.
It's amazing that as humans, we've evolved to not manage to do that, like, naturally, just like you'd think we would be thinking about things, but we don't, do we, still? Not really.
Yeah. I know we trigger the flight or fight response all the time, don't we?
Yeah.
I think most of us are living under constant stress because we're doing that far too often.
And I think that's why mindfulness and things like that are becoming more popular again, just because people need something, don't they, to kind of counteract this busy kind of, and it feels a bit like a hamster wheel, doesn't it? Like you can't get off it sometimes. And I think the second you do that to somebody, the second they feel backed into a corner, it's going to be really hard for them then to do anything positive with it, isn't it?
Yeah. We do live in a culture. We have to remember that pharmaceutical industry do have quite an influence, don't we? I'm not a kind of what's it when you're kind of a conspiracy theory person, but we probably do reach for medical treatments, pharmaceutical treatments quite easily. It's quick.
Yeah.
You can prescribe HRT in about 5 minutes. Whereas to do a course of CBT, that's hours and hours.
So what are the results from that? If you prescribed HRT to somebody and they left and started taking it, what would the results or how would they start feeling better from that as opposed to with CBT?
It can be a very, very, very quick fix. You can feel better within a few days,
right.
Actually. You can start, definitely. It can be, when it works, it really can be quite quick and quite noticeable. Yeah, whereas CBT, like we said before, it takes a bit of work to actually, retrain your brain, and it's not going to be a quick fix. Yeah.
I think as well, there's that whole thing of like, you take medication and you feel better, and that again feels like somebody else is fixing you, where I think CBT is very centered around you fixing you or you changing the way you think. And that's going to be hard for a million of reasons for lots of people as well, because, you've lived a whole life and all those thoughts and feelings are in there, and some things might trigger situations. And so, I can see why the tablets are a lot easier and faster, but
some people, CBT is never going to work for.
And the other thing I've never heard, which I kind of wanted to end my podcast on, was just the positives of it, because like everybody's been going to me, are there any positives of it? What happens after it's finished? And I'm like, there's tons. Look at all the ladies on cruise ships.
So the one positive I always quote is that I had this lady come bouncing into my consultation room one day, and she looked so pleased with herself. I said, well, you're looking happy. What's wrong? She said, I'm through the menopause and I can finally wear white jeans again.
Exactly. See, we need to quote these.
White jeans on, and she's like,
and you save a fortune. Sanitary products, you can't save a fortune.
Yeah, no sanitary towels, no worry about contraception.
Well, thanks so much for this. It's been amazing.
Really
Thank
nice
you.
To speak to you, Nicky.
And you. Yeah, it was brilliant. Thank you. All right, bye.
I don't have crow's feet. I have happy, happy memories of laughing with friends until the tears flowed. I don't have frown lines. I have the marks of my frustration and confusion, which I battled through, smiling in the end. I'm not going grey. I have shimmering highlights of wisdom dashed throughout my silver hair. I don't have scars. I have symbols of the strength I was able to find when life got tough. I don't have stretch marks. I have the marks of growth and the marks of motherhood, my womanly evolution. I am not fat. I bear the evidence of a life filled with abundance, blessings and good times. I am not just forgetful. I have a mind so full of stories, memories and moments, there is scarce room to hold much else. I am not old. I am blessed with a life of great length, something not everyone can say. Don't change the way you look, my friend. Change the way you see. Change the way you see.
This podcast was brought to you by Nicola Foley and Buzzsprout. Music from Zapsplat and Adobe. Poems by 40 and Change the Way You See by Donna Ashworth. Read by Carolyn Logan. Thank you to my guests Susan Morrison and Dr. Laura Jarvis.